My name's Rebekah, and I'm an international marketing manager at the International Marketing and Recruitment team here at Lund University. And I also am a graduate of the university. I recently graduated from a master's in applied cultural analysis. So I understand the shoes that you're in at the moment as potential applicants for the university. And Johan, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Rebekah. My name is Johan Gunnarsson. I'm also an international marketing manager here at Lund University, also a graduate of Lund University. So we all end up working for Lund University. I've been working in this department for 11 years now. So I've been doing it for quite a long time, but only quite recently we started having regular webinars. I guess it started a couple of years ago, but then last year, of course, we kicked into higher gear, as it were, and now really doing a lot of webinars this autumn. So this is kind of the beginning of the season for us. Throughout October, November, also December, we will host a number of events. We will tell you a bit more about that later. But I'm very happy to be here today and share information about Lund University with you all.
Exactly. So we will start with a bit of information today. We'll give a presentation, and the presentation will cover some information about general Sweden and also Lund and the university itself, so that you can get a bit of background on those things, what it might be like to come to Sweden to study at Lund. And then Johan will go through some really useful information about the application process and bachelor's and master's programs and other important information that you need when deciding to study. So we will ask you to save your questions for now, because after we've given the presentation, we'll do a Q&A where we can take your questions and answer as many as possible. But we would ask you to wait with your questions for now, because we hope that the detail that we're going to give you will answer a lot of the kind of common questions that people have about things like the application process and what programs are available, funding issues, things like that. So if those are the kinds of things you're thinking about at the moment, then hopefully we can answer those questions for you during this presentation. So I will start with a little bit of information about Sweden. And one important thing to note is that Sweden is not Switzerland. So some people sometimes get confused between those two countries, but Sweden is part of Scandinavia in Northern Europe. And there's a few things that you might want to know about Sweden. Firstly, there's not that many people. The population of the entire country of Sweden is around 10 million. So for some of you, that might mean that you come from a city with a larger population than all of Sweden. It's very spread out, the population. However, it is a very large country in terms of its geographic size. It's actually the 5th largest country in Europe and the 3rd largest in Western Europe. So that means that there is lots of space for every individual. The largest cities in Sweden are Stockholm, which has around 2 million inhabitants, Gothenburg with about 1 million, and Malmo, which is quite local to Lund, and that has about 650,000 inhabitants. So Sweden is known for various values and things that it holds dear, and some of those are listed on this slide, such as democracy, gender equality, creativity, innovation, and sustainability. And many things that you probably use every day actually originate in Sweden. So some innovations from Sweden include Spotify, the safety match, Skype, the adjustable wrench, the 3-point seatbelt, and the zipper. So all familiar and useful objects. I'm sure many of you have also heard about IKEA, which was founded in Sweden in 1943. There are 433 stores in 52 countries across the world with around 200,000 employees. And we actually have in Sweden the highest number of multinational corporations per capita in the world. Some of the brands that you might also be familiar with include Volvo and H&M. And of course, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the footballer Zlatan Ibrahimovic. There's a great finding that according to the OECD, Swedes are among the best countries in the world for quality of life. And it's thought that some of the reasons for that include things like a really good system of parental leave. So in one of these pictures, you can see a bunch of dads with their with their babies, and Sweden is known for having good gender equality, particularly in regards to the ability of fathers to take parental leave as well as mothers, which is great. Also, fika, represented by the little semla bun there on the top left, which is basically coffee break, very important part of Swedish life. We've also got an amazing music scene, so you might be familiar with bands like, of course, ABBA, Robin, Avicii, The Hives, I think is that picture there, and unique traditions like midsummer. So in the middle of the picture, you can see two guys with flower crowns, and that's a very Swedish tradition in the middle of the summer to wear those and basically celebrate the longest days of the year. We are also the country behind the Nobel Prize, which is each year awarded to recognize an academic, cultural, or scientific advance. And we often get the question if students need to know Swedish when coming here to study. And the answer is no. Sweden actually has one of the highest English proficiency among non-native speakers in the world. In other words, you can come here and have a European study experience without any language barriers, which is brilliant. Okay, so that was a little bit about Sweden. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about Lund University itself. So Lund University was founded in 1666, which means that we recently celebrated over 350 years of being an institution. We are a comprehensive and research-intensive university ranked among the top 100 universities in the world, which we're really proud of. We are a public, non-profit university, and we have over 43,000 students, so around 43,700, I think, and 8,380 staff. The main campus is in the historic city of Lund, which has been a university town for very, very long time. It's a city dating back to the year 990, and it has a population of 120,000 people, which includes students from over 130 countries. So it's a really international and vibrant atmosphere. There's academia, business, culture, and nature, and it's all within cycling distance, which is great. Lots of students say that buying a bicycle is one of their most important purchases in order to study at Lund. So we have this lovely picturesque city centre, which includes this cathedral that you can see in the picture and has lots of lovely winding cobblestone streets. If you are perhaps studying subjects such as fine arts, music, or public health, you could also find that your main campus is actually in Malmo, which is the third largest city in Sweden, as we've mentioned earlier, with 350,000 inhabitants. It's only 10 minutes by train from Lund, and it's about 30 minutes by train from Copenhagen airport. So obviously in these days at the moment with COVID, perhaps that isn't as important as it used to be, but hopefully we're going back to the days when it's useful to have such a great international airport really close by. And it's certainly useful for when you're arriving into Lund because you can reach us quite easily from just across the border in Denmark. And the other thing to note is in this image, you can see one of the landmarks of Malmo, the turning torso, which is one of its famous buildings. And then our last campus is the city of Helsingborg, which is 30 minutes by train from Lund. And you can also cross from Helsingborg over to Denmark by boat and visit the historic town Helsingør, which is beautiful. I've been there myself last year and it was really lovely. Helsingborg is the fastest growing city in Sweden, and it's a hub for entrepreneurs and logistics companies. As you can see, it's located by the sea. which is really lovely. And it has around 4,000 students, so it's about 10% of Lund University's student body. And the programs which are centered there are service management, strategic communication, and energy efficient and environmental building design. So if those are subjects which appeal to you, you might end up in Helsingborg. Okay, so Lund University has a great location in the southern part of Sweden, being part of what is sometimes called the Greater Copenhagen region, which spans across from Sweden to Denmark. And in this region, you can find 14,000 researchers, 190,000 students, 19 research parks and incubators, and 17 higher education institutions. So that's really a lot of opportunities there. We are really proud to be Sweden's most international university. 23% of our student body is international, 60% of students on our master's programs are international, and we attract students from over 130 countries for our master's programs, and also exchange students from more than 600 partner universities worldwide. So you really can meet everybody from across the world at Lund University, and it gives you a really good chance to start a global network. There are many unique traditions and vibrant student traditions in Lund, and there's lots of shared activities which are really unique. Some of these can be seen in these pictures. So one of them is what is normally referred to as the last of April night in Lund. So the 30th of April usually starts with groups of students gathering for a breakfast with champagne and strawberries. And then during the day, students gather in the Stadsparken, which is the city park, for barbecues and drinks. And it builds up to a traditional Valborg bonfire, which is kind of like, I think that's one of my favorite Swedish traditions because it's sort of like burning away the last bit of the winter. It's the start of spring. And they sing songs and often end up with a student theatre premiere at the AF building. There's also the Lunda Karnevalen, which is a student carnival that's arranged every 4th year by around 5,000 student volunteers. The carnival is a really old tradition. It dates back to 1849, and each carnival has a different theme. We also have the Sept Student Theatre, where there's a sort of mixture of humour, music, comedy, everything really comes together in those shows, which produces these really amazing interactive theatrical events. We also have student nations, which are like large social clubs that organise extracurricular activities like dinners, pub nights, brunches, sports, lunches. It's just a great range of different activities put on by the nations. And we have student unions which monitor education quality and support student influence through around 1,000 representatives. And they also run careers fairs as well. We also have the Academic Society, which is known as AF, which operates student activities like television, radio, the Specs Theatre that we just mentioned, drama, choirs, and orchestra. So as you can tell, there really is a range of associations for all interests, and there's a lot more to your academic life, a lot of non-academic pursuits that you can enjoy when you're here as well. Okay, so finally, we'll just focus in a little on the faculties as well, so that we can give you just a little bit more information about the university. So we are a comprehensive university, meaning that we cover a really broad range of different subject areas. We have 9 different faculties and more than 30 world-leading research fields. We're actually a very research-intensive university because 1/3 of our budget every year goes to research. So we pride ourselves on our world-leading research. This slide has a few examples of areas where we're particularly strong. There's quite a lot: aging, supportive environments, biodiversity and ecosystem systems, cancer research, climate modeling, diabetes research, epidemiology, e-science, humanities, and information technology and mobile communications. So a couple of areas where we've really led the way with different research areas include Bluetooth, which started through a collaboration between our university and Ericsson and was named after the Viking king, Harald Blåtand. Also the Høvding, the built-in airbag for cyclists. And when I first started walking around Lund, sometimes I would see somebody without a helmet on a bike and I would think, why aren't they wearing a helmet? And then I would notice this little collar that they're wearing, which turns into a helmet should they fall off their bike. Pretty cool. The ultrasound, so researchers at Lund University were actually the first ones to ever see a heartbeat on an ultrasound, which is pretty awesome. We also have the Max4 Laboratory, which is a world-leading synchrotron radiation laboratory. And it's basically known throughout the world for its scientific breakthroughs within medicine, engineering, and science. And it was inaugurated in June 2016. But it's actually growing even more, that particular area, because now we have, in the same sort of development area, the ESS, the European Spallation Source. And that's also a world-leading facility for neutron science. So it looks at the atomic and molecular structure and function of materials like plastics, proteins, and medicines. And that's going to be opened for research in 2023. And it's going to be used by at least 17 European countries. So that's a big development for us.
Right. Thank you so much, Rebekah, for this introduction to Sweden and Lund University. I enjoyed that myself. You always learn something new. Moving on, we're going to talk a bit more about the actual bachelor's and master's programs that we have available for you here, international programs that are taught in English that we're offering here in Lund. First of all, the bachelor's degree programs that we have on offer for new international students. We currently have nine of them that are taught completely in English. Now, bachelor's degree programs in Sweden, they are 3 years in duration. So you would study full-time for 3 years to earn a bachelor's degree program. And they are course-based. Usually, they consist of a set of mandatory courses that all students in the program will take together. And then typically you will have also the chance to take elective courses based on your own interests. And finally, the last semester you will devote to writing your thesis. So this is what happens over those 3 years. Also, for many students, there will be an opportunity to study abroad at one of our many partner universities that we have around the world. Lund University, we are proud to say we have partnerships with some of the best universities you can imagine in Europe and outside of Europe. So the opportunities for our students to go abroad to some very good universities, it's there for many. Sometimes there's also a chance to do an internship as part of the program. And I would say, because people often ask, can I do an internship? Will I be able to do an internship? I would like to refer you to the program information pages to see exactly what type of opportunities are available within the program that you're interested in. So please do that. Now, in order to be considered qualified for entry to a bachelor's level program, you must have completed your upper secondary school studies, your high school studies in your home country by the time that you apply. That basically means that if you have not finished high school yet, maybe you will finish high school next summer, in the summer of 2022, you're in your final year currently, you are going to have to wait to make your application. So those who have already finished high school and can prove this, they can apply now, or rather after the application system opens, but you will apply this winter and then you may start in the autumn of 2022 if you are selected for admission. So you must prove that you have finished high school. You must also prove your English language proficiency. You must have reached a level of English that we in Sweden call English 6. And that basically means, for example, if you come from an English-speaking country, most likely, if you have finished high school in an English-speaking country, you will fulfill this requirement. But if you come from a non-English speaking country, you probably will need to take an English language proficiency test to prove your English language proficiency. Now, a test such as IELTS or TOEFL, they're the most common ones. You can take whichever you want. We don't recommend any over the other, but you will need an average of 6.5 on the IELTS test and 90 for the TOEFL IBT to be considered qualified for English language proficiency. Then our programs may also have their own specific requirements. For example, if you want to take a science program, then you must have a certain level of, for instance, mathematics, possibly physics, or chemistry, biology, depending on which program that you are applying to. So you need to make sure that these requirements are fulfilled before you make an application. Now, there is no minimum GPA requirement, actually, but it's a competitive admission, which means that we will look at your transcript and look at your grades, and we will compare those grades to all the other applicants, basically. And those with the highest GPA, grade point average, will be selected for admission. And that is basically the only way you can be considered for a bachelor's program here. So the higher your GPA, the more likely it is that you will be selected for admission. We do not look at recommendation letters for bachelor studies. We do not look at, for example, personal letters or any other extra documents that you might think that we need. We just look at your upper secondary school GPA. Now, for master's level, it's slightly different because, first of all, we have a very, very comprehensive selection of programs available that are taught in English. Currently 135. There's always some debate every year about how many programs do we actually have. This number varies a bit year on year because some programs only start every other year, and we also add new programs every year. So, but at the current count, we have around 135 master's programs. Wide range of subject areas: science, social science, humanities, medicine, law, business, economics, fine and performing arts, etc. Most of the master's degree programs we have on offer, they are 2 years in duration, but some are just 1 year. Most of those 1-year programs can be found in business administration or a subject related to business administration. They are course-based, or we say sometimes module-based, and they also conclude with a thesis or a degree project. Now, it's important to note that all our master's degree programs, regardless if they are 1 or 2 years in length, they prepare you for a PhD or continued research-oriented activities. The programs are based on current research and connected to industry, business, and society. You will find, if you enter a master's degree program here in Lund, that your teachers will be active researchers. And of course, active researchers, they know all the, the current or the latest breakthroughs in their research areas. And this will benefit our students enormously because you will be exposed to that. There's quite a lot of opportunities to tailor your coursework with elective courses. You will have, again, I will have to refer you to the program specific information on our website to see exactly, for example, which courses are mandatory courses and which programs may be elective courses, because there's a huge difference between different programs here. So please check with the program or programs that you're interested in to see how many mandatory courses and how many elective courses they might have. In some of the master's degree programs, there are opportunities to do internships or study abroad. You may spend a semester abroad, but not all programs will have this opportunity. So please check the program details of the program you're interested in. Now, the entry requirements, and this is very important for all our master's degree programs, of course, because in Sweden, all master's degree programs will have a set of entry requirements that are firm. You must fulfill those requirements in order to be considered for admission to a master's degree program. But first of all, we need you to complete your bachelor's degree, of course. But you may apply during your final year of bachelor's degree study. So if you are currently a final year bachelor student in your home country or a third country, you may still make an application and we can consider you for admission. And we will then offer you conditional admission, of course. You must prove your English language proficiency. And here we have the same level as we do for bachelor's level studies. That is the so-called English 6, which is IELTS 6.5 or TOEFL IBT 90, basically, unless you have previously studied in an English-speaking country. And through those studies, you already fulfilled the requirements. Most of our programs, the vast majority of our programs, they will require that you have completed a certain number of credits in one or several courses, actually. To just give you an example, if I would like to apply for the master's program in physics, they will require that I have completed a bachelor's degree with a major in physics. And they may also sometimes state that you need a certain amount of credits in, for example, mathematics, a certain number of credits in statistics, or I think you follow my drift. You must have these and you must fulfill the entry requirements as they are stated. Some programs, however, are open to all students, basically, regardless of your academic background, you can apply. One example is, for example, public health, which is a program that is open to students from a variety of academic backgrounds. But there are others as well. So a handful of programs that we have at master's level are open to all kinds of previous majors. GRE or GMAT are not commonly used or recognized in Sweden, actually. So none of our programs require that you have taken a GRE or a GMAT test to fulfill an entry requirement. But some programs, for example, finance, the finance program that we have, which is top 50 in the world, they do say that if you have taken a GMAT test and you are very pleased with the result, you are welcome to submit the result to us so we can have a look, but it is not a firm or formal requirement by the program. So it's just, if you have taken the test, please submit it and let's have a look. Also for master's admission, it's a competitive admission process. Basically, we collect all the applications to a program and we compare the applications, and we try to select the most suitable candidates, those that we feel are suitable for the program and who we feel are most likely to be successful in the program. But there is such a thing called selection criteria. So if you go to our website and you find an interesting programs, I would like you to first of all study the entry requirements. Then you may have a look at the selection criteria, which are also stated on that page. And you can see how the program goes about actually selecting students for admission. You can see, for example, oh, they look at my previous grades, my GPA, they look at the content of my statement of purpose, for instance. And there you can find out how you the program, they select their students. You can check the tab requirements and selection on the program webpage. So every program will have their own unique admission requirements and their own selection criteria. And I would, again, advise you to study this carefully before or when you are preparing your application, so you know how they will select their students. If you go to our website, I hope many of you have already visited our website, lunduniversity.lu.se/programs. That is where you will find an up-to-date list of the international programs that we are currently offering in Lund at bachelor's and master's level. So what's it like to study in Sweden then? Well, I have studied in Sweden, and Rebekah, she has also studied in Sweden. What many people say is that it's a rather informal classroom environment where there is a pretty close relationship between the teachers and the students, and it's quite informal. Typically, for example, you would call your professor by their first name rather than his or her title. So you would say, if the professor is called Thomas, you would say, Thomas, can I get help with this because I don't understand something? And that's considered completely normal here. There's a lot of group work happening in the Swedish classrooms, the Swedish university classrooms, and students are expected to be active in these discussions that happen either between students or students and teachers together. You don't have too many courses at the same time, typically just one, possibly two. So there's not so much, you will be busy with your course, you will focus on that course. It will take a couple of weeks typically, then you will finish the course and then you will start the next one. So it's not like you have 8 or 10 courses all at the same time. So you can focus. Now the course length, it varies. It could be anywhere from 5 to actually 20 weeks long, which is a complete semester, of course. But I would say the typical course would be 5 weeks long. Sometimes 10 weeks could also happen. 20 weeks is a bit extreme, I would say, but I think we are referring here to the thesis writing, basically, which could take a whole semester. Now, how many hours per week can you expect to have with the teacher or inside the classroom? Depends a little bit on your major. Take engineering, for example, you can have up to 30 hours per week, formal lecture hours with a teacher or a professor. But if you look at humanities, social science, maybe it's just 10 to 15 hours per week inside the classroom with the teacher. But the rest of the time, of course, you're supposed to spend studying together, either on your own or together with your classmates on group assignments. Typically, there would be 25 to 30 students in a class, but this also varies, of course, depending on your major. Sometimes we have lectures with 70, 80 students participating. And sometimes in some classes, you have fewer than 10 people participating. So it varies a lot, but 25 to 30 would be seen as some kind of average number, I would say. There's a lot of laboratory work for certain majors, especially I would say engineering, science, and medicine. Of course, you will spend a lot of time in the lab. There's a lot of emphasis on group work and group activities. But we do have an academic support center. So if you need help with your studies, if you're struggling for some reason, you think, I need help, I need advice, we do have such a support function at the university for students who need help. So tuition fees in Sweden are required for non-EU citizens, basically. So it's very important to plan for this early on, so it doesn't come as a shock or a surprise next year if you're admitted and you receive an invoice. So if you're a non-EU citizen, most likely you will have to pay tuition fees to study here. The tuition fee rate varies quite a lot depending on what type of program that you're in. Just to give you an example here, if you're studying social science or business at the bachelor's level, the tuition fee currently is around $11,500 per year. For science programs, physical geography, physics, and mathematics, it's $16,500 per year. And biomedicine, it's $21,000 per year. This is for bachelor's level studies. Yes, US dollar prices approximate. Of course, the exchange rate fluctuates quite a lot. And I don't know, this time next year, maybe it will be cheaper or more expensive, depending on how the exchange rate changes. For master's level studies, the rates are a bit different, but typically, if you're looking at humanities, social science, it would be at the cheaper end of the spectrum. So around $12,000 per year, 12,800, I'm sorry. For business studies, typically around $14,000 to $15,000 per year. Engineering, $17,500, also for science and environmental studies. For medicine, biomedicine, public health, it's between $16,300 to $21,000 per year. And architecture plus fine art, we're looking at $24,500 per year. But in order to find out what your program will cost, I would like to invite you to visit our website to check the program specific information there. You can see exactly the program cost for the programs that you're interested in. Now, what about living expenses? Well, we have here a recommended monthly budget and to see what it is that you will spend your money on. So food, basically $275 approximately. And I would like to say that this is based on the assumption that you will cook most of your own food. Because I would say here in Sweden, if you go to a grocery store, you buy groceries, it's not that expensive. But going to a restaurant can be very expensive in Sweden. And this is not something that most students, regardless if it's local students or international, it's not something you can do, 2 or 3 times per day, because that will break your budget, of course. But so assuming that you will cook most of your own meals, which is completely normal for most students, $275 is more or less what you'd expect to spend every month. Accommodation is usually the biggest expense, monthly expense that you may have. And of course, this depends a lot on where you end up living, because we, for example, in our dormitories, there are cheaper units and there are more expensive units. So depending on where you end up staying, you will, pay accordingly. So between $375 to $560, basically, somewhere around that. Course literature, maybe up to $100 per month. And other, expenses that you may have, such as your mobile phone or going for a fika, as Rebekah mentioned before, with your classmates, or buying clothes and stuff like that. We have budgeted around $175 per month. So that is more or less what you would need. And this is also something, if you come from outside of the European Union, you will need to apply for a residence permit to stay here in Sweden as a student. And in order to get the residence permit application approved, you need to show the Swedish Migration Agency that you have a certain amount of money in your bank account. And typically what they need you to have is around $1,000 per month. So if you will stay, depending on how long you will stay, of course, you would need the corresponding amount of money in your bank account in order for them to approve your residence permit. So this is kind of a rough guide, I would say. You can spend it a little bit less, of course, and also a little bit more if you go to restaurants all the time. But this is kind of a realistic budget for most people. Of course, for non-European citizens, non-EU citizens, I should say, there are scholarships available to apply for. We have a local scholarship program here in Lund called the Lund University Global Scholarship, which can help you with the tuition fee, basically. So it can help you with a part of the tuition fee from, I would say, around 25% of the tuition fee up to almost 100% of the tuition fee can be covered by the Lund University Global Scholarship. For some people, depending on your nationality, of course, you may be eligible to apply for a Swedish Institute Study Scholarship. I think it's currently available for 40 different nationalities or something like that, 40 plus nationalities, if I'm not mistaken. I would like to advise you to go to the Swedish Institute website to find out if you are eligible for this scholarship, depending on what country you're a citizen in. And this is also a very good and generous scholarship program. So if you are eligible for this, please do make an application. In some programs, for example, industrial design, they have special program-specific scholarship. And it's kind of interesting, the industrial design scholarship that we have is funded by IKEA, the IKEA Foundation. So they have a very close collaboration with IKEA. So many people would like to maybe apply for a scholarship immediately or even before they apply for a program, but it doesn't work like that in Sweden. So first of all, I would like to advise you to concentrate on your program application. That is really what you need to focus on right now. And after you have completed your program or programs application, then in early February, you will be invited to apply for a scholarship. Right now, you need to focus on the programs though. Sometimes people from certain countries have their own scholarship organizations, and we are working with many of them. There are a couple of countries in Latin America, for instance, that we are working with their national scholarship organizations, so students can get funding from their home countries. There are also sometimes banks offering student grants or loans. Swedish banks do not offer loans to international students. You would have to be a resident in Sweden, a full-time resident, in order to be qualified for such a loan. So you need to look at banks and other funding agencies in your home country, I would say, in order to secure funding for studies here. So right now we're at the end of September, and it's quite exciting because next month, October, is when we open up for application. So October 18, so three plus weeks from now, is when we open up. And we stay open until January 17, 2022. So there's a 3-month window for you to make your application to Lund University. And if you do so successfully, you will start your studies here in the autumn of 2022. In August, is mid to late August is when we usually invite international students to join us here on our campus. So October 18 is when you can apply. And Sweden, we have a national application system. So all Swedish universities are connected to the same application system, basically. And this is called universityadmissions.se. So that's kind of an application portal. So you would need to go to this application portal, universityadmissions.se. You need to create an account, which is very simple. Basically, you just provide your personal details, your name and email address. And then you create an account. And after that, you can add Lund University programs to your application and submit your application. For master's applicants, you can select up to 4 programs. So you can apply to 4 programs at the same time, but you have to rank, of course, these programs according to your preferences. For bachelor's applicants, you can apply to up to 8 programs, if I'm not mistaken. So you can select more than one, but you always have to rank them. So we have 2 very important deadlines coming up in this application route. And I think sometimes this is a bit confusing for people because they don't understand which deadline is for what exactly. But simply put, the January 17th deadline, that is the last day that you can make an actual application online to enter one of our programs. So on January 18, it's no longer possible to add any programs to your application or to edit your application. So 17th of January, it's the very latest day. I obviously recommend that you don't wait until January 17 to complete your application, but you can. But that is the last day. So please don't miss the deadline, 17th of January. That is when you apply online and submit your application. But then the next deadline, which is on February the 1st, that is when we need to have received all your supporting documents. So this is also a very, very important deadline because some students think that, oh, well, I'll submit my supporting documents later in March or April when I can, but that's going to be too late. So if you have documents arriving after February the 1st, there is a pretty strong chance that your application will not be considered. So these 2 deadlines are super important. Do not miss them, because if you do, there is a strong chance that your application will be rejected, basically. And then you're going to have to wait a whole year to apply again. So the steps involved for making an application. First of all, find your program at our website, lunduniversity.lu.se/programs. So this is where you go, your first stop to find the program or programs that you are interested in and that you wish to apply to. Now, you have found a program, 1 or more programs on our website. You want to make an application. What do you do next? Well, very, very important, check the entry requirements of the programs. Because as I explained earlier, we cannot consider you for admission unless it's clear from your application that you actually fulfill the entry requirements of the programs that you are applying to. So if it's very clear, if you look at your transcript and you compare it to our entry requirements, and it's clear that, well, you don't fulfill the entry requirements, please try to find another program where you do fulfill the entry requirements. because it must be obvious that you do fulfill the entry requirements. So this is super important here in Sweden. Next, you have found a program, you have made sure you fulfill the entry requirements, then you go to universityadmissions.sc and create an account. It's very simple. It takes just a couple of minutes to create an account. And once you have created an account successfully, you can choose one or more programs and add it to your application. Then you are asked to rank the programs. Why do we do that? Well, because even though you may add several programs to your application, up to 4 master's programs, you can only ever get one admission offer in the end. You cannot be admitted to 4 different programs. So we're asking you to rank your programs in order of preference. That means that the first program, your number 1 program, they will get the first chance to offer you admission. If the program, your first choice, if they don't want you for some reason, then your second choice program, they have a chance to offer you admission, etc. So that's the way it's going to work. If you are admitted to your first choice, then program number 2, 3, and 4, if you have added 4 programs, they will not be able to offer you admission. So you can only get one offer in the end. Yes, and webinar for applicants coming up. That's right, because you guys, if you are planning to come here next autumn, you are not yet technically an applicant because you haven't been able to make an application yet. But starting from October 18, you're welcome to start making your applications. And then after that, of course, we're going to have several webinars to help all of you, or as many as possible, make complete applications. So to make sure that you can get properly evaluated and assessed by the programs that you're applying to, and hopefully in the end get an admission offer to study at Lund University. All right, I think now you're probably tired of my voice, so we're going to listen to Rebekah a bit again.
Great. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to kind of wrap up the presentation with a little bit of a recap on some of the reasons why you should study at Lund University. And there are many listed here. As we've mentioned, we're a world top 100 university. We're an internationally renowned research intensive university. We're ranked among the top 100 universities for global employability. We are Sweden's most international university, students from across the globe, over 130 countries. We have many unique interdisciplinary degree programs. And as we've sort of talked about, Johan mentioned, there's an informal collaborative environment when it comes to the contact with your professors, which is really cool. And then a few more reasons, because our degrees will prepare you for a PhD and a continued research career. We have a close connection to industry and business. We have a very unique student life with things like the nations, the specs performances, etc., which again are really unique. Lund is a safe, calm, and student-friendly city, and there's an opportunity to start an international network and career at Lund University. So in terms of next steps and things which you can do now, as Johan already said, it's a really good idea to look at the program pages and start there. And then to join us later in our webinars for applicants. So the next webinar for applicants will be, general webinar, I should say, will be on the 20th of October. And if you go to our webpage and go to virtual events, you can find that webinar listed there. There is also a great opportunity this term to join our subject area events. And I think there was actually a question in the Q&A about this. Can you come and basically speak to somebody from your program? And the answer is yes. We are going to host every week a different subject area week. I believe this week we're already starting this week with Science Week. So you should start seeing some things on the social media pages and things like that, which reflect some key facts about our scientific programs and our science faculty. And there's also an opportunity to speak to members of staff once a week, and also to have a social sort of chat with students from the programs. So keep an eye out for these subject area weeks. Every week we'll have a different theme. And again, if you look on the webpage, you'll be able to find the one which most fits your interests. It's themed by faculty, so it'll be every week a different subject area, and then you can come and join us for that. We also have a really, really nice opportunity to chat with current students. So this is through our Unibuddy scheme, which basically pairs you up with students who are currently studying, and they come from all over the world. They study a range of different programs, and they're there to answer questions about student life, their own experience, how they found the study culture here, anything really that you want to ask them about the student experience from a peer-to-peer perspective. They're there to help you with that. And finally, you can also follow our students on Instagram at Lund University is our account. And every week we have a student ambassador who shares pictures and images that they feel are like representative of their experience. So this is a great window into the student experience as well. Really good opportunity. And if you have any other questions, or if after the Q&A that we're going to do now, you still have really specific questions that are perhaps to do with you as an individual and your particular study background, or maybe the country, the nationality that you have, or the country of study that you're from, that we can't really answer in this kind of format, which is a bit more general, then of course, please do feel free to contact us. The web address here, lunduniversity.lu.se/degree studies, is where you can fill in our web form with a bit more of a detailed query, and we will get back to you and try our best to answer that query, or point you on to the right place. And that was the end of our presentation. So I hope that you found that useful. I mean, I think that we went through a lot of information there about the application process, the programs, etc. And now we have a bunch of questions in the Q&A. So we're gonna start that in a second. Thanks, Johan. We can go back to this now. So I was trying to answer a few questions as we went there. So if you're interested, you can have a look at the answered tab in the Q&A, and you'll see probably quite a lot of things answered in there. But I also highlighted a few questions that I thought might be good to answer now to everybody live. So yeah, Johan, would you like to answer any of these, or shall I go ahead and?
Well, I'm seeing, I assume we're seeing the same thing in the Q&A. So. I have the top question is from a person called Anisa Diana. Yeah. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah.
I can take that, I suppose.
Sure.
So Anisa is asking if we will continue to have online courses due to the pandemic, but you still need to be in Sweden. So basically what's happening right now is that we are mostly online, but we are planning to go back to full face-to-face teaching starting from November the 1st. So depending on the circumstances in the different programs, for some programs it may be very easy to transition from completely online to completely offline, if you will. For some programs it might be a bit more challenging, so they're taking a bit longer. But basically, what we know now is that the plan is to go back to full, traditional, as it were, teaching starting from November the 1st. So, next autumn 2022. I mean, who can hazard a guess? It's obviously very difficult to say, depending on how the pandemic around the world, how it will evolve and what will happen. We can't see that far into the future, but I think most people agree that we would like to go back to, or return to pre-pandemic style traditional teaching, maybe with a mix or a hybrid kind of solution offered as well, depending on the circumstances in the future.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope that answers your question. Then we have a question from Sarah. Do EU dual citizens coming from a non-EU country also get a tuition waiver? And I'm happy to say that if you have an EU nationality, you are exempt from tuition fees. So you just have to apply with your evidence of your EU nationality, such as normally a passport is what you would use when you apply. But the one thing to be aware of is that if you are an EU citizen, but you don't live in the EU, then when you apply for a personnummer, a personal number here in Sweden, which many students apply for, you have to provide private health insurance, whereas EU citizens can use their eHIP card. So that's just a small thing to be aware of if you're in that situation. But the wonderful advantage is that you have got no tuition fees, and it is not required to have a residence permit to come here as a EU national. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Sarah. Let's see what else.
So Sarah is coming back with a second question. Is there an advantage to submitting a program application sooner rather than later? Well, in terms of getting an admission offer, there is really no difference, but there are some advantages. For example, if you make an application early and there are maybe problems discovered with your supporting documents, then you will get feedback about that from university admissions in Sweden, and there will be time for you to fix any issues. But if you wait until the very last moment to make an application and complete your application with supporting documents, it may be that they will not have time to look at your application or supporting documents until after the deadline to submit documents. And if they at that point find problems, then it's too late to fix them. So we always recommend that students make and complete their applications as early as they possibly can. So please do so.
Yeah, and I'm going to reply to a question from Maurizio by text because it's a little bit more specific to him. But I'm just going to move on to the next question, which is from Paula. And Paula says, I've already started my bachelor studies in a university in Mexico, but I want to change to Lund. If I'm accepted, will I start all over, like again with my courses, or can I revalidate some credits? Now, this is a very common question about what we would call transfer students, transfer of credits. And the answer is that it may be possible once you've received an offer to talk about whether or not you can transfer some credits from your previous studies over if you've studied exactly the same program before or very, very similar topics. But this is not a conversation that the program coordinator would have with you until you have an offer. And when you apply, you can't indicate anywhere that you have previous experience like this, usually, apart from perhaps in a program specific document, but it doesn't count towards anything when you apply, basically. So you have to apply like normal, as if you're applying from the start. And then when you get an offer, it's a conversation that you can have with the program coordinator. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah. I think we can add there that it's, I mean, in some countries around the world, it seems that it's quite common to transfer between different universities, or maybe even from one country to the next. In Sweden, it's not that common that people transfer between schools or universities, and also not very common that you transfer from one country university, the university system, higher education system in one country to Sweden. So in theory, it can happen, but it's just not very common. But we have a question from Kunyu Liu. Oh, sorry, question disappeared. Thank you.
Sorry.
And another question is that if I get permission, maybe you mean admission, does the university provide accommodation? If not, is there any help to get accommodation? Well, Kunyu Liu, if you are a fee liable non-EU student, then you have a housing guarantee. So if that's the case, fee liable students, they are qualified to get university provided accommodation. Of course, it's not included in the tuition fee, so you still have to pay the rent yourself, but you have a housing guarantee. For other students, for example, EU students or those who do not qualify for guaranteed accommodation, there is help available. We have several housing agencies that exclusively help students get accommodation. There are housing lotteries, or there are also, you can rent privately, as it were. If you find an apartment or a house where you share with other students, that is also possible. But only non-EU tuition fee paying students are actually guaranteed housing.
Exactly. So it can be a challenge, but most students manage to find accommodation in plenty of time. Okay, so then we've got a quick question from Maria. Is there an age limit to apply? Are you less likely to get admitted if you're older? And it's interesting, we were talking about this earlier, but the simple answer is no, there is no age limit to apply. You're very welcome to apply regardless of your age.
Yeah, and we did have this exact discussion before, Rebekah. We do have one or two programs, I believe, in business majors where they say that they want recent graduates, but what that means in practice, it's hard for us to say. There is no formal age limit anyway. And I think you will find in Sweden in general, it's quite common that people go back to university after they have worked for a couple of years and they want to get a new degree or they want to have an advanced degree. So they are, adults basically going back to university. It's very common here. And there is nothing negative about it. We have Flavio Hotel. Hello, my high school completion documents will only be available in July 2022. Will I be able to start the academic year in the fall same year 2022? Well, Flavio, you are, because you are not considered fully eligible until you can prove that you have finished high school or upper secondary school. So in this application round that we have been talking about today, which is open between October 18 and January 17, you cannot apply because since you haven't finished high school yet, we won't be able to consider your application, basically. If you are an EU citizen, there is a so-called second admission round, which is open between March 15 and April 15, where local students, Swedish students, and also EU students may apply to bachelor's degree programs. And then you can complete your application in the early summer months, basically, when you finish next year. But that will leave you very, very little time to actually prepare to come here because the admission results are announced. What do you remember, Rebekah? It's like mid to late July, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's
so
very late.
That will leave you, I mean, a month perhaps to make all the preparations to actually come here. So it's possible, not strongly recommended, but only if you're an EU citizen, because then you do not need a residence permit to join us here. If you're a non-EU citizen and you need a residence permit, we cannot recommend using the second admission round. If that's the case, you're going to have to wait a year to apply.
Exactly. And then we've got, let's see. Okay, I'm going to complete that one. So somebody asked, I studied in a North American style university in Lithuania. This is from Evianda. Okay. And she says, he says, sorry, my bachelor's degree was all in English. Do I still need to present an English proficiency test? So as I think we mentioned, most students will apply with an English test, but some can apply with their previous studies. So the best thing to do is to check out the page about English requirements on the university admissions website, which I can put in the chat actually, if that's helpful for people. It's a really useful page and many people ask this question. Actually, I answered it a few times already because it's very specific to you. It depends on which country you studied in. So I'll just leave in the chat log here a link to the entry requirements regarding English. And then if you have a look there, you can find out what's actually suitable for you. Okay. And then we've got, will there be a webinar about specific programs? Again, we've kind of answered that a little when we talked about the subject area weeks, but I'm going to link the upcoming virtual events into the chat so that everybody knows that there will be specific webinars about individual subject areas, and you'll be very welcome to join us there. So I'll just put that in the chat there. Yeah,
Excellent.
what else have we got here?
We have Thales Barbosa Batista. I have an IELTS with C1 and no score below 6.5, but I took it in 2018. Can we accept it? Well, that's a good question, Thales. Typically, what we say that if we can verify the result, then we can accept it. Because when you send us an IELTS test result, the people at University Admissions in Sweden, they will check with the British Council in this case to see, have you taken this test and is the result, valid and everything. So they have to verify that. But the British Council, they will also say that, well, an IELTS test result is only valid for 2 years. And after that, after 2 years, we cannot guarantee that you're able to verify the test result. So it's a tricky one, but I would say, since it's very clear that your result will have expired at this point, because it was taken 3 years ago, if you want to make sure that you are okay for admission this year, I would advise you to take a new test, actually, because most likely the result has expired and we won't be able to verify it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's always best to go for the safest option, really. That's what we can advise. Okay, let's see. So the next question is Dilraj Singh. And the question is it possible for one to work part-time during their studies to subsidize living costs? And this is a common question as well. And the answer is that it is possible. Your residence permit for studies of a non-EU citizen allows you to work. However, it can be challenging to find a part-time job because we have a lot of students all seeking part-time jobs in Lund. And it can be advantageous to have Swedish because that opens up a few more options as well. So it can be difficult to find a part-time job. And also, when you apply for a residence permit, you have to show that you already have enough funding to cover your living costs, which we talked about earlier in terms of providing evidence that you actually can afford to live here during your time at Lund. So you can't count on a part-time job as your only means of support. You must also make sure that you have some savings when you apply for your residence permit, whether that's from your own savings, family, etc., or whether it's from a scholarship or some other source of funding. So hopefully everybody who was watching noted the information about scholarships, and those are a good way to support yourself with your tuition fees. But then you also have to consider, can I also afford the living costs? And it's really important to make a plan for that early rather than late.
Okay, so then we have a question from Britt van den Tillart. If after you have applied for a program, when will you get to know if you're definitely admitted at the very latest? Well, Britt, I think it's important for everyone to understand that since we have a national application system in Sweden, all admission results are announced at the same time, basically. So regardless if you make your application in October or December or even in early January, all students get the admission result at the same time. And I believe next year it's on April 7, I think, for master's students, 6 or 7.
I think so.
Yeah, April 6 or 7. So that is when all students get notification of selection. And then bachelor's applicants, they will need to wait, I think, a week after that. So April 13, if I'm not mistaken, is when they announce the result for bachelor's applicants. Some students may get what we call preliminary assessment letters, which is basically an early notification of that they will be selected for admission. But this typically only happens in around March, if it happens at all. It's very rare, I must say. So please, Even if you're an excellent student, you cannot expect to get such a thing. So have your, focus on the first week of April, because that is most likely when you will finally learn if you're admitted or not.
Great. Okay, what have we got next? So we've got a question from Janki or Yankee, Sana. I have applied last year at your university. Do I need to apply again and create a new account again? If you have applied last year, you don't need to create a new account because you can log into your previous account on universityadmissions.se, but you will need to apply again. So you'll need to select the program again and make sure that you click apply. Otherwise, it won't automatically know that you want to apply again. In terms of the documents that you uploaded last year, you don't need to re-upload them if they're the same requirements this year. So for example, if you need to submit your bachelor's certificate and you've already uploaded it, that's fine, you can leave it there. But just make sure that there's no updated requirements for the program, like now maybe they ask for another document that you didn't have to provide last year. And also make sure that everything is labeled really clearly so that we can tell the difference between a new document that you would like them to consider this year. For example, if you update your statement of purpose, make sure that you label it as 2021 to 2022, for example, so that they know what documents to look at, because that can be the only issue when you're uploading new documents to your old account. I think that's probably most of what you need to know. Oh, maybe I should add as well, it doesn't harm your application that you've already applied once before. Sometimes people ask that question, like, does it matter that I applied before? No, that's absolutely fine. In fact, if you've previously found that you've been assessed as qualified, then that can give you some confidence to know that you hopefully will be qualified again and that you can compete against a new group of students this year. So I wouldn't say it harms your application whatsoever. Just make sure that you address any issues that were missing last year, if there was anything, and that you check that there's nothing that you need to update. Would you add anything to that, Johan? Or?
No, I think that's good
Yeah.
advice. Also, just a quick note there, because the student asked if they need to create new accounts, and we do not encourage that at all, actually, because the university admissions in Sweden, they will only ever allow you to have one active account, as it were, or one account per person. So if they find the same personal information linked to another account, they will merge these accounts, and who knows what will get lost in that process. So don't risk it. Use the same account as before. So Peter Ngomba has a very simple question, I think. Please, what is the time frame for applying for program-specific scholarships? Well, the scholarships you can apply for here in Sweden, you apply for in early to mid-February, something like that. After we told you in the presentation that we have two deadlines. So first, January 17, that's the deadline to make an application online. February the 1st is the deadline to complete your application by providing supporting documents and paying the application fee if you're a fee liable student. Now, after that, after February the 1st, we will invite students to apply for the Lund University Global Scholarship. And I also think the Swedish Institute Scholarship is around that time. Early to mid-February is when you are looking to apply to those scholarships, Peter.
Yeah, and I would just add that the application window for the Lund University Global Scholarship is very short. It's only 1 or 2 weeks, I believe. So please do pay attention to the information that comes to our applicants around that time, because you don't want to miss the window.
No, I mean, if you're eligible, you will get an email notification and an invitation to make an application for a scholarship, but early February, that's the time.
Exactly.
So Janki, we have Janki again. Sane, if you have been admitted for a program, but unfortunately you can't make it, do you need to apply to that program again? Janki, yes, that is the way it works here. So if you were admitted last year, but you couldn't make it, if you want to come next year, you're going to have to make a fresh application, but please use the same application account as you did previously. And
I've answered this a couple of times with Karen Melly asking, I did my bachelor's degree in English, so I'm just wondering about the English language proficiency and what documents I need to submit. There's a link in the chat about the English language requirements, and I would encourage anybody with questions about English requirements to check out that link to find out what applies to them, because it will vary depending on where you previously studied as to whether or not you can do that, and then you need to follow the link to your page about your specific country of study in order to find out more about what exact documents you need to submit. So I hope that's okay. Yeah. And then we've got, we've already answered Peter's question. That's great about the scholarships. There's a question about translation of all documents into English. Usually you need to have your documents translated into English or Swedish. I think there are also a couple of other languages which are sometimes accepted if you study in certain countries. So again, I think it's a good idea to check out the country specific pages about in terms of like what those requirements are. What would you say, Johan?
I would say, first of all, if you're talking about your official documents that were provided by your home university, then I assume in Russia, then yes, definitely you're going to have to get those translated into English. My recommendation is, if it's possible, that you get them issued directly by your home university, if they can provide this service, that they have both Russian language document and English language of the same, documents. Otherwise, you're going to have to go to an official translator to have that work done. But you need definitely to provide it both in Russian and in English. So please do that. We have a question from Joaquin Balcells. Can you please repeat the information about applying before one graduates? If you're going to apply, Joaquin, for master's level studies, it's possible to do so while you are a final year bachelor student in your home country. But then you would need a document confirming this from your home university, confirming that you are indeed a final year student currently, and that you are expected to graduate before you join us here in Sweden. Most students around the world who are in their final year will graduate sometime in the spring or the summer of 2022. So if you are in that situation, you will need to get such a document from your home university. It confirms that you're a current final year student and that you are expected to graduate in, whenever that is. Maybe it's the summer of 2022. So please don't forget that document.
Okay, let's see. So now I'm just going to scroll through a little. I can see a couple more questions about the second round for bachelor's applicants. Again, that's for EU students applying for a bachelor's specifically. And I will put the key dates and deadlines link in the chat just now as well. One moment. So that should help answer anybody who's wondering when the new deadline would be if they're in that position. Okay, now I can see from Christy, and she's asking, is the English bachelor's in mathematical science the equivalent of computer science or information technology? And then underneath that, we have a question from Tilda. If I've taken both world history and American history, but not a standalone civics class, is that still equal to Swedish civics? So both of these questions are really about the eligibility for bachelor's programs, from what I can tell, or for master's programs, perhaps for you, Christy. And it's very difficult for us to answer those kinds of questions because it really is so specific to you and your particular educational background. So we can't usually pre-assess students' eligibility. We can only really advise you to look at the program pages and look at your own transcripts and the descriptions of the courses that you've done in the past to try to self-assess your eligibility. Regarding the question about civics, that is a very specific and slightly confusing thing in Sweden, because lots of the courses and programs require civics, but not every other country in the world has a specific civics course that you would study at high school level. However, from what I understand from the University Admissions website, civics can often be considered equivalent to something like history. So that may be the case for you, Tilda, that world history and American history could be considered as equivalent to civics. But again, we can't really answer that during this event because it's so much up to the admissions staff, I would say.
Right. Then we have a question from Putri Octavia. Hey, once we get the admission offer, do we have to pay the fee, some kind of fee to secure the spot? Or can we wait for the scholarship announcement before securing the spots? Well, Putri, you can wait if you want to, because all the results of the scholarship applications, they will be announced before our kind of deadline to accept your offer. So if you'd rather wait to find out if you are going to get the scholarship or not, then you don't have to rush to accept your offer. But I would like to say that there is always a chance to get to be placed on a reserve list for a scholarship. So you may not find out immediately that you're getting this scholarship, but later, maybe in May or even June, if you have been placed on the reserve list, you can still get the scholarship offer. And if you have not successfully accepted your offer at that point, well, then you may have missed the chance to join us here. So yeah, there is that to consider.
Exactly. Okay, so we have a few more questions here that we haven't yet really looked at. One of them is how to calculate ECTS credits for non-EU students. Johan, I know you have a little information on that. Do you want to?
Yeah, it can be. I understand
tricky.
it can be a bit confusing. There is a lot of information floating around on the internet about this, but most of the time we actually refer students to the European Union website about ECTS and how they are calculated. It is also possible if you go to your favorite search engine to type, for instance, how do I, convert credits for my country system to ECTS, and get some kind of information about that. So you get an idea about, for example, is one ECTS the equivalent of 2 credits in your home country or something like that. It's usually not that difficult. We do not have, a very good tool available to all students for how to do this. So we leave it up to the students to find this information by themselves and try to convert their credits into ECTS to understand if they fulfill our entry requirements or not. There is some information about it on our website. If you go and search for ECTS on our website, I don't have the link here and now, but there is some information and some links provided on our website for how to understand ECTS and the way the system works.
Yeah. I can see another question here from Zakia. Hello, I would like to ask if any possibilities exist for a double degree in master's programs at Lund. If yes, how would the application process work? So unfortunately, you can't apply to do 2 degrees at the same time here at Lund University, or I don't think that's possible in Sweden, to be honest, because of the way that the system works here. You apply for 4 different masters at most, and then you have to rank those. So you're only given acceptance to 1 of the degrees which you select when you apply. And also, it wouldn't necessarily be practically possible to do 2 degrees at the same time anyway, because each one expects around 40 hours of work a week. So as you can imagine, that would be very difficult to combine. One thing which you could do if you really wanted to was, as you're studying your master's degree, if you wanted to add an additional course, there are some freestanding or standalone courses which you can add on top. So for example, when I was studying my master's, I also did a side course on Swedish during one of my semesters. However, that was tough, I have to say. It was really tough to balance alongside my master's program. So you have to think carefully about that. And it wouldn't lead to an additional master's qualification. It would only be for fun or learning alongside your master's degree. Yeah.
So here we have a quick one. Dilraj Singh. can I only choose one program on the University Admissions in Sweden website? No, Dilraj, you may select several programs. If you're applying for a master's level, you may choose up to 4 programs and add them to your application. If you're applying for a bachelor's level, I believe the limit is 8. But you will have to rank your choices in order of preference. So your top choice, your favorite program, it has to be number 1. Your second favorite, number 2, etc. And those would more be considered kind of backup options, in my opinion. So the first choice program, that's the one you really want to get into the most.
Exactly. Okay. So now we've got another quite simple one from Karim. Can you waive the application fee? No. If you're a non-EU student, then unfortunately you have to pay that fee, which is 900 Swedish krona. And there is no way to waive that application fee. That basically is the administration fee for the university admissions team. So that's important that you make sure that you pay that before the admission fee deadline. If you're an EU student, again, another benefit of this is that you not only are exempt from tuition fees, but also from the application fee. Yeah, so that's a simple one, I think.
Yeah, we have Inga Mukose. I don't know if you are talking about a bachelor's level application or a master's level application. So it depends really, because if we're talking about the GPA, then obviously it's an average. So they will look at all your grades basically and calculate your grade point average. But sometimes you can see in the selection criteria that we have for our programs, they will say, we look at your GPA, but they pay particular attention to the courses or to the grades of the courses that are kind of relevant for the masters that you're applying to. So if you're applying to a major within business, for instance, they will look how you performed in the past in those, relevant courses. And they will probably not pay so much attention to courses you may have taken that are kind of has nothing to do with business administration at all. But if you're applying for a bachelor's level, they will look at all your grades for all courses that you have taken at upper secondary level.
Okay, and then we have a few slightly complicated questions, I would say, because, for example, Tamara said, actually that one I can answer, I think. Tamara says, I'm missing 60 credits in business administration for a master's program. Is there any chance to only apply for a course in business administration before applying to that particular master's program in order to get the credits required? Well, for one thing, it's important to know, like we talked earlier about credits, 60 credits is usually equivalent to around a year of study. So that's quite a significant amount of study of business administration, and would usually be a master's, for example, in business administration rather than a short course. So it's important to note that before trying to, meet that requirement. Find out how much credits that really translates to in whichever country you're studying. And if that's Sweden, then it will be a year of study. And it is absolutely fine to, for example, study a 1-year program in business administration in Sweden before then applying for another master's here, meeting the other requirements through previous study, for example. You just need to make sure you submit everything that meets those requirements so that it's obvious to the admissions staff that you have met the program specific requirements. So yes, you can do that, but you just need to make sure that you know exactly what you're missing and exactly what that means in the country of study that you're currently looking at. I hope that answers your question, Tamara.
We have a question from George Nagala. Hello, I studied in Cameroon. I tried to enroll Lund University beginning of this year to no avail. The program was Master of Science in International Marketing and Brand Management. It's George, I have to tell you, this is the most popular master's program at Lund University. So it's very, very competitive to get in. And I empathize with you that you maybe ended up on the reserve list, but so did several hundred other students. It is very difficult to get into this program. But anyway, you have evaluated your documents with the Swedish Council for Higher Education in Stockholm, so that university admissions in Sweden, basically. Do I need to send those through for evaluation again? Well, George, if university admissions in Sweden, if they have already approved your academic merits and your English, your proof of English language proficiency, then you do not need to send those documents through again, if they were indeed approved the first time. But you will need to make a new application online, and you should also update your program-specific documents, namely the statement of purpose, perhaps the CV as well. When you applied for this program, they require you to fill out, they have a template for this particular program. And you should update that to reflect the fact that you are now applying for 2022.
Exactly. So we have a question here from Nick Schuber. Hi, I have done a master's in business administration from the UK and I want to apply for a PhD. And this is a common question. This presentation has been about master's and bachelor's programs rather than PhD. But Nick Schuber is asking, do students get a stipend during PhD, and what is the tuition fee? And what is the criteria for admission? So it's worth probably mentioning that PhDs in Sweden act much more like a normal job. So there is no application period, there is no specific criteria, or rather no general criteria. There's only specific criteria for each particular PhD. And yes, you do get paid to do a PhD. And you can find our PhDs on our vacancies page on Lund University, because they are like any other form of employment at the university. So we won't answer like further questions or detailed questions about PhD, because that's not our area of speciality. But I hope that gives you just some basic information about PhD. And many of our master's students do go on to get PhDs here in Sweden, which is great.
Right, and we have, I think we can, I answered the George's question.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we have Christy Karangal. Are there student discounts or benefits that apply with Sweden, for instance, in transportation, clothing, etc.? Well, if you are a full-time student here in Sweden, or if you are a student, you're eligible for certain discounts, both locally and at the national level, and even EU level, because I've heard of students who take their Swedish student cards abroad with them to other countries in the European Union and get student discounts even there. So yes, you will be eligible for certain student discounts. Of course, not everything and everywhere, but you will be eligible for certain discounts.
Yeah, which is a really nice little benefit there. Okay. And then we've got, is it possible to apply for more than one scholarship? If yes, can you attend with more than one? It is possible to apply for more than one scholarship. And this is from Joseph Lawson. It is possible to apply. And we in fact encourage you to apply for more than one scholarship, because it's very competitive to get a scholarship. So you have no guarantee of getting any particular scholarship. So it's a great idea to apply for more than one scholarship and to seek out different sources of funding. If you do receive a scholarship, such as the Lund University Global Scholarship, which offers a tuition fee discount, then if you get another scholarship, which also offers a tuition fee discount, as you can imagine, you can't really get more than one 100% discount. So there is a sort of limit as to what you can get depending on which scholarship you are offered. But I believe it's possible to accept more than one. It just depends on which ones you're talking about and how they work together and what they're for. But I'm not sure. Maybe you know more than me about that, Johan. I'm not sure if I.
Well, if just in the Swedish context, it's not possible to get both the Lund Scholarship and the Swedish Institute Scholarship at the same time. Then, if you do, and it sometimes happens that students apply to both these programs and actually get both, then we will remove the Lund University Global Scholarship offer and give it to another student, because we will assume that the scholarship recipient would prefer to keep the Swedish Institute Scholarship, as it's a bit more generous. But if you're talking about like a completely external scholarship, maybe some kind of scholarship from your home country and combine it with the Swedish scholarship, I think it depends on like Rebekah said, on the specific circumstances. It's hard for us to know, but for the Swedish scholarships, you're only ever allowed to keep one of them. But there's another scholarship question here. Dicky from Indonesia. I've got the scholarship from my government to study a master's degree. Will it make a bigger chance for me to be accepted by Lund? Tack. Well, Dicky, no, actually not, because you will apply to the program and it's a competitive process where we try to select the best students. And the best we don't base that decision on your funding situation. I mean, who funds your studies is not relevant in that context. We look at your academic merits and everything else that is relevant for the program that you're applying to see, is this the most suitable candidate to join? So in that particular context, how you fund your studies is not relevant, basically. So you need to get through the competitive process.
Yeah. Do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, I can take the next one. Ruth, hello, I'm from Peru. And here we are vaccinated with Sinopharm. I guess that's one of the Chinese COVID-19 vaccines. Is there going to be a problem with that type of vaccine? Well, it depends on what you mean by problem. It may be a problem to enter the European Union because, as far as I know, the Sinopharm vaccine is not officially recognized by the European Medicine Agency, actually. But there are other ways to enter the European Union. It's not required that you are vaccinated. If you have a fresh COVID-19 test taken, then you may still be able to enter the European Union if you can prove that you are not ill, of course. But then I can tell you guys who are listening now, and it might be interesting for some, that students at Lund University are eligible to get vaccinated locally in Sweden. So that is something that some international students do while they are here. And that's quite new, isn't it, Rebekah? Because in the spring, because they, as in many countries around the world, they went through, at-risk groups and senior citizens, et cetera, and now it's trickled down to, people who are just in their late teens and early 20s who are eligible to get the vaccine. And that includes international students here. So you as an international student, you will be eligible to get vaccinated here.
I even saw something recently which was about, I think, drop-in vaccination opportunities. So we're working hard on making sure that we offer those opportunities for our students. But yeah, again, next year, who knows exactly what it will look like, really. Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see, I think. Okay, so I'll just prove that one as well. Well, we are now getting through the Q&A, but of course we don't have like every question yet. But I'll just finish this one. Okay, so we had a question from, I apologize if I say your name wrong, Nindikam or Dikam Kiara. So Kiara from Cameroon asks, can I continue with a degree program? I have a diploma in midwifery after 3 years study in a professional school. So I think we've kind of covered this a little when we mentioned about transfers. It's not usually possible to transfer from a different program directly into a program here at Lund University. But if you apply for a program and then you get accepted, you can ask them whether your credits can be transferred at that point. However, you've mentioned that you have a diploma in midwifery, and I think that might raise the point that we don't have a bachelor's program or a sort of entry-level program for somebody who's looking to become either a nurse, a midwife, or a doctor, or another healthcare professional that's taught in English. So if you wish to become a registered healthcare professional here in Sweden, you normally have to study in Swedish, and that also includes clinical psychology as well. So that can be quite a competitive and difficult process because you have to prove your Swedish proficiency before you can even compete for a place and those programs are very competitive. So basically the answer to your question about whether you can transfer in is unfortunately not. And the answer to whether you can even apply to study midwifery here is only if you first study Swedish and then find an appropriate program which allows you to do that. And I'm not actually even sure whether our university offers a midwifery program because our specialism is, of course, the international programs taught in English. But you're really welcome to have a look at the Swedish website, which is just lu.se, and you can have a look and see whether that's something that we offer here. Yeah.
So let's see where we are at. Christy Karingal, as Sweden is gradually diminishing the low-wage jobs in the country, will it be difficult for university students to find a part-time job? I'm not sure if there is a policy to gradually diminish the number of low-wage jobs. I mean, service sector jobs that are mostly, I mean, there are many entry-level positions. Those will be needed as much as in the past. So I don't see really or agree necessarily that we are diminishing the number of low-wage jobs in the country. At least that's not a policy that I'm aware of. But I mean, to be honest, as Rebekah explained earlier, it's getting a part-time job is not something that people can take for granted that this will happen, or even getting the first job if you do not have any experience whatsoever. Getting an entry-level job, it is quite difficult actually in Sweden because it's competitive. But that's the case in most countries, I feel.
Yeah, I think it's, again, I can't speak to whether it's a policy of any kind, but I just would say, as I mentioned earlier, it's important not to count on a part-time job when you study here because it can be very difficult to find one, but that's for all sorts of reasons, including the fact that we're a busy university town with many different students seeking out that work at the same time. So even in the best of times, we probably don't have enough jobs to go around all of the students here. Yeah, I hope that that's kind of helpful anyway. Yeah, so then we've got a couple of questions here that I can see. Just gonna check here. So I'm gonna skip down to Karen's question. Is it possible to get the recording of this webinar for reference? Thank you, Karen. I'm glad you think that it's informative. We have been recording this and we will be sharing it. We also had a webinar this morning, so I think we'll just share one of them, but we can choose later which one we feel covered the most in this time. So don't worry, we will be hosting that and sharing it on our website.
We have an English language proficiency question here from Britt van den Tillart. Is Cambridge English certificate C1 level or higher sufficient to prove English proficiency, or perhaps when complemented with sufficient bachelor's degree GPA for English course, just to check what is enough to prove your proficiency? Well, Cambridge, University of Cambridge ESOL examinations, Cambridge ESOL, they say if you have level C1 advanced, you must have a minimum overall score of 180 to be awarded what we refer to as English 6. So if you have Cambridge ESOL examinations C1, you must have a score of 180 or above, or advanced level, it says here. I'm actually reading from the University Admissions in Sweden website. But if you have completed this test, Cambridge test, you can go to University Admissions in Sweden, the website, and look for English language requirements, and you can find your test, the test you have taken, here in the list, and they will tell you exactly what you need in order to fulfill the English language requirement. So it's right, it's not just about TOEFL or IELTS. I mean, we talk about TOEFL, IELTS, but there are other English language proficiency tests as well, including University of Cambridge ESOL examinations.
Yeah, exactly. Putri Octavia asks, hi, if we got accepted on a program but we did not get the scholarship, is it possible to defer the offer to the next year? And it's important to note that it's actually very rare to get a deferral of your studies for 1 year. This is usually only offered in really, really sort of specific and maybe extreme circumstances, maybe relating to health or something where it's considered a very persuasive case, and usually not getting the scholarship is unfortunately not considered as one of those cases where you would be offered a deferral. So you would have to probably apply again, I would say. Sorry to say that.
Yep, that's correct. Mihaela Otel. If I graduate from high school at the end of June, beginning of July 2022, is it possible to start the academic year in August, September 2022? Yes, I don't know if you saw our or listened to our presentation where we said that, first of all, it's only recommended for EU citizens, local students, Swedish students, and other EU citizens to apply in the so-called second admission round, where you would be able to get your admission results sometime in July. I think it's mid to late July. And then you may, of course, join us here in August, but that will leave you very, very little time to actually plan and prepare everything, I would say, especially with regard to accommodation, for example, which is super important. But in theory, yes, it's possible, Mihaela, if you are an EU citizen.
Okay, and then we've got Claudia. Hi, my name is Claudia from Mexico. If I took the GRE and I got a good score, can I still include it as an additional document for programs that don't ask for it? And you specifically said, are there programs related to public policy or public administration? So as far as I'm aware, the only programs which actually mention the GRE are the business programs, and they don't require it, but they also don't mind if you want to send it, is what I understand. But in any other subject area where they don't mention the GRE at all, then I wouldn't advise submitting anything extra that's not requested or mentioned on the program pages, because it can only really distract them from the documents which they're asking for. Would you agree with that, Johan? Like, I think it's important to stick to what they're asking for, generally speaking.
Yeah, I mean, our programs are not actually able to consider documents that they haven't explicitly asked students to submit. But if you're applying to one of the programs related to business or economics, that faculty, they do actually sometimes consider GRE or GMAT test results. So you may then submit it to us.
Exactly. Regarding public policy and things like that, I can't think of a program off the top of my head which specifically relates to public policy, but you're very welcome to browse our programs or search for those kinds of terms and see whether something comes up. But I don't think that we have something in that area personally.
No, we don't have a program that is called a master's program in public administration or anything like that, but it may be related to our other programs within social science, perhaps. So you can have a look at our international studies and social science program portfolio to see if there's anything that matches your background.
So a couple of quick questions here. So from Maurizio, one last question: do we need to pay the full tuition fee? Like, I think he means 1 year payment, or is there other options? Usually the tuition fee is paid in 2 installments. So it's like 2 installments a year. So the full yearly payment would be split into 2. I think that's a simple and quick answer to that question. If you've got a 2-year program, then of course you would make that payment every semester for each of those semesters that you study in.
Correct. We have Chima Akubua. What is the study-work balance for master's students? Well, we expect students to study full-time, defined as 40 hours per week. And some of that time will be spent in a classroom type environment with a teacher. Some of that time will be spent maybe on studying on your own or together with your classmates. But outside of that, those 40 hours per week, you're free to, if you're referring to a part-time job here, not so sure, but if you are referring to a part-time job, there is no actual formal limit to the number of hours that you're allowed to work. But I mean, studying at master's level in particular, it's hard work. And we want you to be successful at school, right? And successfully take your program. So we can't very well recommend that students spend too much time and effort actually dealing with a part-time job outside of school.
Exactly. Also from Kima, I don't have my original certificate yet. I think you mean your degree certificate. Can I apply with my statement of results? If you are a final year bachelor's student and you're applying for a master's program with us, then it is possible to apply before you have your final degree certificate. But you need to fill out a specific form, which is on university admissions. And then you need to provide us with your transcript. And then once your degree certificate arrives, you need to also upload that so that we can confirm that you have it. So yes, it is possible to apply if you're your final year of bachelor studies and you're applying for a master's. And there's more information about that particular situation on university admissions if you search for final year. So you can have a look there.
Yeah, we have Maida Ramani. Sorry for any pronunciation errors. Hello, my name is Maida, and I have a Bachelor of Science in Physics from Iran. Actually, reaching to the IELTS TOEFL test centers at this time is not possible, but I have a Duolingo English score. Is it acceptable for reviewing my application? I'm afraid I have some bad news, Maida, and that is that we do not accept Duolingo at this point in time. We get this question quite often these days. I'm not so sure why. Maybe it's easier to take this, or has been easier to take the Duolingo test now during pandemic times, perhaps. But as far as I know, there are no plans to approve this from university admissions in Sweden from their side. So Duolingo test results are not currently accepted, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Okay, then we have a question from Yidan. What is the Yidan Lang, sorry. What is the pass rate of postgraduate studies? I'm sorry, I don't have that information. And I think it must vary depending on which program you're studying. Yeah, I'm not sure if we can really answer that for you. But I would say it's quite common, like it's uncommon to fail and you should have lots of support on your program to support you if you do run into any trouble. One of the reasons why we have these quite stringent requirements is to try to make sure that when you do come here, you have a good experience and that you're able to succeed fully. So I wouldn't go into it expecting to have any problems as long as you meet the eligibility requirements. But we are quite a competitive university and we do have quite a high academic standard. So yeah, that one's a bit tricky to answer really.
Yeah, I think we can just add that there is pretty strong support for students who are struggling with their studies. And I mean, we want our students to be successful, right? We want them to pass. So if it happens that you fail a test or an exam, you will get the opportunity to take it again. We're not going to kick you out just because you fail the test. But of course, you know, if you fail too much and too many times, eventually it's going to be difficult to keep up with the rest of your classmates. So we do hope and expect that most students will pass most exams and tests so that they can keep the same, you know, pace as the other students in the class who are successful.
Janomari Collins asked, as a master's applicant, will the application fee cover 3 to 6 applications, or does each have an individual application fee? So just to explain the way that the application fee works, it's per application round. So if you're applying for, say, 4 masters in this between October and January, then you just pay 1 application fee, which is 900 Swedish krona. Also, Janomari asked whether they can be any kind of promotional code or an application fee waiver for attending this webinar. Unfortunately not. We hope that the information is useful to you and valuable to you in other ways, but that fee is not negotiable for non-EU students, so you will have to pay that fee.
We have a question from Jonathan Hurtado Carabali. Hello, I would like to know how is the appropriate way to send study certificate? I have a bachelor's degree in communications with a GPA of 4.2 out of 5 and applied to strategic communication master in Lund, I suppose last year or earlier. But they said there was an issue with my papers, with your documents. Your IELTS is 6.5, so that should be enough. Maybe they already approved your English, I don't know. But the issue with your other supporting documents, I cannot say here and now, because there are so many possible things that can go wrong with the supporting documents. Maybe you provided the incorrect set of supporting documents. Maybe there was a translation issue, or maybe you did not scan original documents and provide those, etc., etc. So theoretically, there can be, you know, any number of issues with your supporting documents, and it's not clear from your post here exactly what they thought was wrong. So please contact us, and one of our colleagues will have a look at your application, so we can explain to you exactly what went wrong last time and give information based on that.
Yeah, we have the form on the chat on the right-hand side that you're welcome to contact us through. I just want to say, for those who are thanking us, thank you. I've tried to say thank you to those who have, but thank you for our session here. And yeah, we really do thank those who have attended. We do have just a few more questions in the chat, and we only have a couple more minutes really. But I'm just scrolling through to just make sure that I can see any new questions here. So there's just a few left. Maybe we can answer some of these still. Let's see. Oh yeah, so there is a question from Moinuddin Faisal. I applied last year. If I apply this year, do I have to pay the application fee again? Yes, you do have to pay the application fee again, because as I said, it's per application round. So that's a simple answer for you. And let's see.
There are a couple of questions we've already answered. I'm not sure if they're still relevant, but we have one from Sutet San. Will I be eligible to apply for a master's program if I don't have a bachelor's degree with a relevant major for that program? Well, Sutet, as we've said a couple of times in the presentation, if it's clear from your transcript or your academic background that you do not actually fulfill the requirements that we have for our programs, then we cannot recommend that you make an application, where you should find another program where you have a match between your academic background and our entry requirements. But I would like to say that there are a couple of programs offered at master's level at Lund University that are open to people from many different academic backgrounds. So just make sure that you actually fulfill the requirements. But if you do not, and if that's clear, then please try to find another program.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we've answered Joseph's question about scholarships. And we've got a question from Anna: which are the most popular and competitive master's programs? Jan, you mentioned that, which one was the one that you said?
Yeah, international marketing and brand management. I would say in the international application rounds, some of the most popular programs, just looking at number of applications, would be within business/economics/finance. Those tend to attract a lot of interest from students. It's just popular to study business and and finance and economics, etc. So those do get a lot of applicants every year. It doesn't mean that they are our best programs in any way, or I mean, all subject areas we have offer very, very good programs. It's just a question of what are people, interested in. The majority of people seem to be interested in studying business, so that's, a lot of people do apply.
Yeah, exactly. So we just have 4 more questions that I've left here, and then I think we should probably wrap up very shortly. But I think it's again, Janamari Collins says, I've been taught in English language from high school, and I have a bachelor's degree. Will a letter of English language proficiency be enough? Please have a look at the English language requirement page to have a look at what's possible for you with your country of study.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I'm sorry, if I'm not mistaken, or Janamari Collins was this person not from Nigeria?
Yeah, I believe so. So I think they might be.
Yeah, they're probably through their upper secondary school studies, if nothing else, they may be exempt from other English language proficiency tests or anything like that.
Yeah, Kazim, who's asking about continuing with Swedish or pharmacology, I hope that you received answers in this presentation that help you to find the programs that you want and to apply. But I've also left an answer for you to a duplicate question with the application steps. So you can have a look at that later. GPA we've talked about, there is no specific GPA system or requirement, but having a good GPA can help you with your application. Yeah, I think we probably will wrap up now. Because we're getting very low on our questions, and I think we've answered most of these. We will be sharing this recorded presentation on our website. I don't think it will be on YouTube, but it will be on our website. So you can always watch this again. And then if you still continue to have further questions which haven't been answered, then please do feel free to contact us through the web form, and we will do our best to answer your question there. Johan, is there anything you would like to add? Or
no, I think we've said most relevant things that we possibly could, and several times over. So for this session, it will soon end, but there will be many more opportunities to connect with us, as Rebekah said, and also enjoy more webinars and virtual information sessions basically this autumn. So we would like to thank all of you who are still here with us.
Thank you so much, those who are still with us. That's great.
And best of luck with your applications and hope to see you next year in Lund.
Yeah, let's hopefully see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.